So get this. What if you could legally end your marriage and then get remarried to someone else, all in just 3 days? It sounds kind of crazy, right? But it actually happened. This is the story of a fascinating legal case that really makes you think about what's fair, what's legal, and where those two things collide. I mean, just picture this. A court declares your marriage null and void on a Tuesday. By Friday, you're already walking down the aisle again. Is that you being clever and just using the law to your advantage? Or is that a massive loophole that was never supposed to exist? Well, that exact question sparked a legal fight that went on for more than 10 years. The timeline here is just wild. On February 16, 1972, Jamboo Prasad Jain gets his annulment. And then boom, just 3 days later, he's remarried. But his first wife, Malti Prabha, she wasn't just going to let that slide. A couple of months later, she files an appeal, and that's when things really get started. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of this 3-day remarriage. Mr. Jain gets his marriage annulled by claiming his wife had a pre-existing medical condition. And with that court paper in hand, he wasted 0 time. He turned right around and married another woman. And that single decision set off this huge legal chain reaction. Okay, to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to talk a little bit of legal speak. The whole case, literally the whole thing, hangs on the difference between 2 words we kind of throw around all the time, annulment and divorce. They might sound like the same thing, but in a courtroom, they are worlds apart. So here's the crucial distinction. A divorce, that ends a marriage that was totally legal and valid. It's like saying, okay, this happened and now it's over. An annulment, though, that's completely different. That's the court saying, poof, this marriage never legally existed in the first place. That's a huge difference, and it's everything in this case. And that difference brings us right to the center of the storm, Section 15 of India's Hindu Marriage Act. Now, look at the wording here. It's super specific. It says after a decree of divorce, you have to wait to remarry. But what word is missing? Annulment. It's just not there. And that one little omission? That is the entire loophole. So yeah, this missing word set the stage for a classic legal showdown. You've got 2 big ideas clashing here. Should we follow the exact words written down, the letter of the law? Or should we focus on what the law was meant to do, the spirit of the law? Now, Mr. Jain's argument was, you gotta admit, pretty straightforward. His lawyers basically said, hey, read the fine print. Section 15 says divorce. We had a decree of nullity, or an annulment. These are legally different things. So that waiting period doesn't apply to us. Our remarriage is totally legit. But his first wife, Malti Prabha, she had a really powerful argument on her side. Her lawyers said, wait a minute, what about her right to appeal the annulment? If he can just rush off and remarry, it makes her right to appeal completely pointless. It's like slamming the door on justice before she even gets a chance. So you've got these 2 very strong opposing arguments. The whole thing goes up to the Allahabad High Court, and in 1979, they came down with a ruling. And at the time, it really seemed like this was going to be the final word on the matter. The judge's reasoning was really methodical, just step by step. First, he looked at the plain text of the law. The words decree of divorce were right there, clear as day. Second, he agreed that, yep, a divorce and an annulment are legally 2 different animals. So his third and final step was to apply the law literally. Since it doesn't say annulment, the waiting period doesn't apply. And that conclusion was pretty stark. The court sided with the husband, ruling his remarriage was perfectly lawful. And because of that, his first wife's appeal was declared infructuous, which is a fancy legal term for, well, what's the point now? It really seemed like the loophole was real, and the case was officially closed. But, it's never that simple, right? Because even though that ruling made sense on paper, it just didn't sit right when it came to the bigger picture of justice. And this story was far, far from over. Fast forward a whole decade. It's now 1989, and a totally different case. Lata Kamat versus Vilas lands in front of the Supreme Court of India. And wouldn't you know it, it's about this exact same question. Now the highest court in the land is going to have its say. And that changes everything. And just look at this contrast. It is a complete 180. The Supreme Court said, nope, we're not just reading the words literally. They ruled that divorce in this law should be read broadly to mean any decree that ends a marriage, and that includes an annulment. And crucially, they said the right to appeal is absolute. You can't just make it disappear by rushing to get remarried. And with that, the 1979 ruling was officially overruled. So, what does this all mean for the law today? Well, the Supreme Court's decision wasn't just about this one case. It was about closing that loophole for good and making sure the system was fair for everyone. So, here's the bottom line. Today, that waiting period before you can remarry applies to both divorces and annulments. Full stop. You cannot legally get remarried until the time limit for filing an appeal is over. And if someone does file an appeal, you can't remarry until that's all settled. This whole thing is designed to protect everyone's fundamental right to challenge a court's decision. And this is a great example of the power of a final verdict. After years of confusion and different courts saying different things, there is now only one interpretation of the law that matters. The Supreme Court has spoken, its word is final, and the debate is settled. So we end up right back where we started, with that huge question. When the plain text of a law creates a situation that just feels unfair, what do? Do you stick to the exact words on the page, or do you look for the law's true purpose, its spirit? Well, in this story, it took a decade, but in the end, the spirit of justice won.